why did I join the Air Force? Because I wanted to do cool stuff. I wanted to go slay dragons. Well, that means that you have to be strong enough and smart enough in order to go find a dragon to slay and then go confront that dragon. So to the young men listening, like, get out of your pity party if you're the one who is opting out. If you're the one who's becoming the exploiter, prepare yourself, because there are better men than you who are coming after you to protect the people that you're trying to exploit. I'm Nic McKinley, and just by way of background, I actually was an orphan, was adopted by an incredible family who changed my life and moved me to Montana, where I grew up. At 18, I joined the United States Air Force pararescue teams, did that for a little over a decade, and then I got recruited to the Central Intelligence Agency, and I spent a number of years in a kinetic unit at the Central Intelligence Agency, ultimately leaving as a country team leader. I think, like most young men, obviously I can't speak to young women, but most young men who want to join the military, ultimately it's just because they want to do cool stuff. I was a child of the 80s and early 90s and saw the cool movies, everything from Rambo to the Green Berets to Navy SEALs to movies about Marines. And I just thought, man, that looks cool. That looks fun. And that's what I want to do. And I've always been a person who wanted to do the hardest thing. So, give me the hardest thing you have, and I'm going to try that. I don't really care what the statistics tell me about my ability to make it or not make it. I wanted to be a medic, and they couldn't guarantee me that. And the Air Force recruiter told me about the Air Force pararescue teams, which I'd never heard of. It still is an extremely misunderstood, very important component of the special operations community. And once the Navy recruiter told me that if I can make it through the selection process, which was statistically harder than the SEAL process, then I was guaranteed to go to all the, kind of what are commonly called the cool guy schools. I was guaranteed to go to Halo. I was guaranteed to be a combat medic. I was guaranteed to go to combat dive, guaranteed all the vertical rope access work and mountain rescue training and weapons training and all the stuff that I really wanted. And so I decided to join the United States Air Force and sign up for the pararescue teams. I was fortunate enough to make it through selection on my first try. I started with over 300 people, and there were 8 of us who graduated. And then I graduated and became an actual pararescueman after going through the pipeline slightly over 2 years later. When you're in that line of work, the physical standards don't change as you get older. I had a guy on my team who I was the 36-year-old team leader, and he was 52, and he was a complete animal. And I just started looking at him. I'm like, wow, do I think that I can be him when I'm 52? I started thinking, like, am I really going to be able to keep up as I get older? And am I going to miss my chance to do something that I can maybe have some significant impact in the private sector? And so I just made the decision to step out. And as thankful as I am for the opportunity that I had in government service and the operations I got to be part of, the reality is the government just replaced me with a younger, faster, smarter, stronger version. The Central Intelligence Agency is all about small teams versus the military is primarily about large teams. So the fit in going into the Central Intelligence Agency was a very good one. I was actually the first person with a pararescue background to be hired into a staff officer position within that unit. And once I came in, then they started hiring more, because in, say, a Special Forces ODA, you've got somebody who's in charge of weapons, and you've got somebody who's in charge of communications, and somebody else is in charge of medicine, and somebody's in charge of leadership. In a pararescue team, every single pararescueman is responsible for every single one of those things. And so you're doing your own communications and your own medicine. And if you're in an assault element, you're an assaulter. If you are in the mountains, you're doing mountain rescue, or in an urban environment, you're dealing with collapsed structures. So the amount of training is immense. Also, the academic requirements for the Central Intelligence Agency are pretty high. The CIA kind of wants to hire people who can do the math, and so does the Air Force pararescue teams. And so that's why that was such a good fit. So when I showed up, at the CIA, and I showed up to my first team and they said, Nick, you're going to be in charge of the communications. Okay, no problem. Oh, you want me to do something different than what was my normal job? That's not a problem. That's something that I can do. My unit was responsible for operational facilitation. So let's say you have a case officer, which is what most people think of in the Central Intelligence Agency. And that case officer needs to pick up a asset, I don't know, on the street corner in Ramadi, Iraq, right? Well, that's a pretty dangerous environment. Those case officers are not trained to be able to operate in those kinds of environments because, contrary to popular belief, case officers in the Central Intelligence Agency are not in shape. They don't have a physical fitness evaluation that they have to take like my unit did. They don't have a quarterly weapons evaluation that they have to take like my unit did. And so our job was to go into the very dangerous environments, make sure the operation got completed, and everybody got home safe. In my unit, we were authorized to carry weapons everywhere, to include the United States of America. So we had to take evaluations in hand-to-hand combat. We are constantly taking weapons evaluations, and that unit was only recruiting from military special operations. And so everybody who showed up to the selection for that unit had a decade of experience, was in shape, could shoot, had already, combat deployments under their belt, had already proven themselves. And even after that, we still lost people in the selection process because they didn't shoot quite good enough, or their fitness wasn't quite good enough, or their combative skills or decision-making weren't quite good enough. So sometimes they might have been incredibly strong, incredibly fast, incredibly good shooters, very good decision makers, but they just couldn't mesh within the environment of the CIA. They were too militarized, for lack of a better term, in their mindset. And so they couldn't get along with anyone else. And that could be a real problem. When I was at the Central Intelligence Agency, I was working with a Joint Special Operations Command counterpart, and he was collecting intelligence on a bomb-making ring and all the different components that go into making bombs, right? It's not just one person doing it. There's people who procure different pieces of it, and there's logistics, and just like any other business. And so he was mapping that out and collecting intelligence on it. And during that process, we ended up collecting what I like to call smoking gun intel on a human trafficker. I had always just assumed that there was a team of guys like me fighting the human trafficking issue, because there's a team of guys fighting illegal guns and narcotics. And when we collected this intel and started trying to figure out, where is that team? Who do you hand this information to? What we figured out was that it doesn't exist. There are some incredible men and women in the Department of Homeland Security, in the DOJ, and the FBI who are trying to fight human trafficking kind of when they're allowed and when they have the time and resources to do it. But for the most part, it all falls to the state and local law enforcement, and they don't have the resources. They oftentimes don't have the training. And so that was what I discovered over a period of years. I learned about 2 American girls who had been kidnapped and taken to this country, and there was really nothing the U.S. government could do about it. And I kept trying to send my team to go do something about it. I was volunteering my guys. I mean, they were the most capable operators in that entire country. And I would volunteer them, and they weren't allowed to. We could never get a green light for a mission to go, just to even figure out what was going on with these girls, much less try to get them back. And that's when I just decided there's better solutions. And that was a real fork in the road for me, where I had to choose whether or not I was going to know that this was happening, because I couldn't unchange that. And was I going to do something, or was I not going to do something? I ultimately ended up going to a graduate program at Harvard. And, I was getting older and wanted to try some new stuff. I'd been carrying a gun for the government for almost 20 years at that point, and really wanted to try my hand at business and potentially raising venture capital. I wanted to solve the issue of child sex trafficking, because I believe that problem could be solved. And so I left the Central Intelligence Agency to start building tech companies. And then I also launched a company called Verify, which was an early stage due diligence company centered around helping early stage investors be able to validate the backgrounds of the individuals that they were investing in. Because I found that a lot of early stage investors, to include my seed investor, all had a story to tell around fraud. I came up with a technical tool ultimately that would solve that problem. And so that's why I left the government to do that stuff. Threats to the United States, child sex trafficking doesn't even make the list of the top 10. If there's a listener listening to this who has, say, a daughter or a son, threats to the daughter or son, yes, this is top 3. And the reason why is because in my day, again, child of the 80s, we all knew who kind of the predators in town were. And our parents just kept us away from, the creepy weird guys on the wrong side of town. Today, the creepy weird guy on the wrong side of town is on the internet. And that guy has access to every single child who's on the internet. And so they go where the kids are. They'll go to Xboxes and they'll find kids and they'll start grooming them and manipulating them into doing things that they regret. Same thing with young girls, young boys getting text messages from somebody they think is their girlfriend or boyfriend asking for a photo that they shouldn't send. And then they send that photo, and now that photo is being used to do what's called sextortion. So it's actually extorting them for money or for more photos or some type of control. So to the United States writ large, no. To the family, this is absolutely one of the top 3 largest threats. Our thesis was, just like when in the fight against terrorism, why don't we go upstream, figure out who's creating this problem, in this case of human trafficking victims, and remove that. And so that's what we do. And so the way that we do this is by primarily targeting the online advertisements that child sex traffickers use. So believe it or not, there's about a little over 30 websites right now. Most of them are international, outside of U.S. jurisdiction, that are advertising young girls for sale in the city that you are at. And you can, if you were to use nothing but Google, you can actually find these advertisements inside of probably 30 seconds. Google would serve them up to you, which is a whole other problem Google needs to start helping with. What we do is we target those online advertisements and we de-anonymize them to figure out who the bad guy behind them is. So once we de-anonymize who the human trafficker is from their advertisement, then we push that information to law enforcement so that they can go take action. There's kind of 2 camps that have come up online around men and the way that men are supposed to act and the way that men are supposed to be. I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in that I think when we look at why did God make men stronger and faster predominantly, like why do we have physical attributes that give us more power? Obviously, the reason why is because we are supposed to protect society against other predatory men. And so to the young men listening, there is a divide in the road. And on one side of that divide, we'll have you destroy relationships and we'll say that you should commoditize and treat women as if they're property and treat those who are less fortunate than you, maybe physically or mentally, as prey. And then there are the men like me, and I'm just a small example of many, who say, no, it's the other way around. You are to use your power in your brains, in your speed, in your drive to protect, not to exploit. And I think that's where our society is. We are reaching this point where it seems that young men feel that they go one of 3 ways. They go the route of exploiting other people and feeling like, well, they can do it, therefore they're justified. Or they just opt out of society altogether. They have no drive. They don't care. They just want to sit in their mom's basement and play Xbox and, go drink with their friends. Like there's no mentality where they want to go conquer the world anymore. And then we have, unfortunately, what seems like a exceedingly few who go the other way and say, no, our job is to motivate those who opt out, get them into the fight, and to fight against those who would exploit. Why did I join the Air Force? Because I wanted to do cool stuff. I wanted to go slay dragons. Well, that means that you have to be strong enough and smart enough in order to go find a dragon to slay and then go confront that dragon. So to the young men listening, like, get out of your pity party if you're the one who is opting out. If you're the one who's becoming the exploiter, prepare yourself, because there are better men than you who are coming after you to protect the people that you're trying to exploit. That's why I started DeliverFund. That's why I've started 10-Point Data. That's why I've started my company Verify in the past. That's why I do the things that I do. And we need more men to step up to the plate into their God-given role of protector and stop spending so much of their time within their hobbies and not actually contributing into society and fighting for what's right.